No, is he in his set flow tank or something? I don't know. Which one? Which car is that? Oh, no. Yeah, I saw that when I parked and I didn't recognize it.
Five cents. And then that video I sent you this morning, he needs that right away. Okay, so we're going to get started. This week's webinar is this particular topic is a very important topic, actually, because one of the things that happens is a lot of attorneys do make a decision many times to go in-house. And when they do, it can be, in many cases, a very bad decision. In some cases, it's a good decision, but in other cases, it can be a very bad decision. And so today I'm going to go over some of the reasons that going in-house is not necessarily everything it's cracked up to be. I do have another article that I've written that's not based on this it's based on this article, but it goes in a lot more depth, and it's called Why Going In-House is the Worst Decision Any Attorney Can Make. And that's also something you may want to look at. Now, I'll say at the start that I do make in-house placements, so I'm not saying it's necessarily a horrible thing for everybody, but there are significant problems with it. And so what I'll do is I'll do the presentation. This isn't a super long presentation, but there is a bit of depth to it. And then after, I'll take questions, and we can take questions about this or any other kind of career questions that you have at the end of the presentation. And with that, I guess I'll just get, so I'm going to talk to you today about insight about whether or not you should go in-house. I'm also going to talk to you in some depth about if you're in-house, potentially going back. And at the outset, it's important to understand that a lot of attorneys believe that going in-house was a very good decision for them, but a lot of them believe the opposite. And I say that for the past 20 plus years, I've been reviewing hundreds of resumes every day. And one of the things that I see is there's definitely a difficult pattern that emerges for a lot of in-house attorneys. Some of them wind up in very good companies, but in the most part, what happens is when someone goes in-house, they'll typically bounce around to several different in-house jobs for a long time. And sometimes they'll be general counsel of a company. But the thing to remember is that there's a lot less stability in any in-house position than there typically is in a law firm if you play it out and get business. And because you're a cost center, and then your job is dependent on the success of the company, whether or not the company is able to stay in business, and then also the management of the company. So there's a problems many times with going in-house. And in my opinion, it's an extremely significant decision. And many people go in-house when they would probably be better off just going to another law firm. And honestly, it's probably among the most significant decisions that most attorneys will ever make. It's that important and drastically affect your future. And it could do so in a positive way. If you wind up in the correct in-house position, you often are going to be much happier and won't have the same pressures, but at the same time, it can be very dangerous. So what does going in-house mean? Most attorneys typically have three different categories of jobs that they can choose from. They can work in a law firm, they can work for themselves, which I guess is similar to working in a law firm, or they can also work for a company or a public interest, or you could also say the government, and have just different types of legal environments that typically aren't charging the public for the services. And the problem is when you work for a company, the company's main business is not practicing law. You're basically taking the skills that you may have learned somewhere else and working inside the company. And that's just kind of how that job works. And different in-house jobs have different responsibilities. Some of them will deal with corporate law, mergers and acquisitions. Some deal with litigation, real estate, healthcare, and other practice areas. If you're in a large company, you tend to be working on smaller matters, more discrete matters. So you'll work on one aspect of tax law, one aspect of mergers and acquisitions in a larger company. And same thing with patents and intellectual property and real estate. And then in smaller companies, you may work on multiple different practice areas. And that's just, then you may be a jack of all trades in a smaller company. So you may handle things for the company founder, you may have their personal matters, you may handle pretty much everything that the company does. And what happens in that situation is when you're doing a lot of different things, and some people may enjoy that, but typically in all in-house positions, the important thing to understand is that if there's a serious matter that the company's facing, or regardless, typically a law firm will be brought in. And as an in-house attorney, you're doing really the work that they don't think that they don't think is serious enough to bring in a law firm. If anything gets that sophisticated, you're typically pulled out and someone else is given the work to do. The reason a lot of attorneys go in-house is because depending on where you work, you could have much shorter hours. A lot of companies, there's some companies that I drive by. When I leave my office, I drive by companies, and they're companies that if I drive by at 6:00 at night, they're practically empty, and they might have hundreds of people working there. I'm thinking of one big software company with huge office park. You drive by at 6 and they're gone. And so that can be, a lot of people will enjoy working in an area where there's a lot less work. That doesn't mean you're not working at home and on the weekends, but the hours can be shorter. The work can be more predictable and routine. Many times, if you go to work at a really good company, you can get very good stock options and make a lot of money. I've known attorneys that have made several $1,000,000. It's very rare to make more than that, but it's not uncommon for an attorney to go to an in-house company and have stock options that are worth 2 to 3 million or even more, 4 million within a few years and then cash out and have other options. So that can happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens with enough frequency that you can actually say it's a real thing. And also you're on the business side of things. So when you're on the business side of things, that means you're interacting with the CEO, you're interacting with business people and helping the firm make decisions that are going to be more profitable for the company. But at the same time, you may not be liked a lot if you are getting in the way of the firm making money and so forth. So there's just issues with that because attorneys' jobs are typically the counsel employer. They're the people that they're working for and helping them avoid problems. But for you, it may be a good idea, but there's a lot of factors that you need to understand about going in-house that may make it a very bad career move. And I hate to say this because there's really so much to going in-house and so many people make the decision of going in-house without realizing a lot of these big mistakes. The first thing is, once you go in-house, it's pretty difficult to get a law firm job. I review resumes all day long, and I have been again for 20 plus years. And when I review resumes, if I see someone that's in another law firm and they've been there for a couple of years, it doesn't matter where you went to law school or what your practice area is. But if you've been at a law firm for a year and you have a minimum amount of employment stability, it doesn't matter what your practice area is. It could be personal injury. It could be workers' compensation, litigation, corporate, immigration. I'll probably be interested in talking to you and have something for you that or at least jobs I can send you. It's if you're in a law firm and you have a practice area and you're at least doing one thing, preferably one thing, you're marketable to other law firms. And I know how to do it. Most recruiters will only work with larger firms, but I work with even solo practitioners, finding people for them to work for them. So there's plenty of jobs out there if you're in a law firm, even if you're senior. People that are senior litigators may have a difficult time getting some positions like in New York City, crowded markets. But if you get out into the suburbs and stuff, there's plenty of openings and there's just jobs everywhere for law firm attorneys. The problem is the law firm attorneys typically are not going to be as interested in in-house attorneys. And there's just a lot of reasons for that. I could go into a lot of detail about it, but the main reasons law firms aren't interested in law firm attorney or in-house attorneys is just because a law firm attorney is working for paying clients, and there's certain standards that are required, and they're used to hours and deadlines and doing work that people are actually paying for. There's certain people that work in law firms, certain people that work in-house, and then people know that you typically, if you leave a law firm, you're most often going to leave again. And so that's not something that the law firms are that excited about hiring. So it's hard for me to work with most people that are in-house. I know I will. I do all the time. Each day I'll have either work for them or have a recruiters with the people in-house that are in certain practice areas. But for the most part, it becomes much more difficult to get a job in a law firm. Law firms prefer to hire people that are in-house. And there's a lot more jobs for lawyers in law firms than there are in-house. And the other thing is most attorneys, when they do go in-house, ever get these economic windfalls. It's actually very rare. No, it depends on your practice area, but most of them end up going to established companies. And so if you go to an established company, you're typically, which is going to have a higher salary, more prestige, you're typically not going to make a ton of money. Now you may, if you take a huge risk and go to some place in Silicon Valley or, New York that's starting up and ends up being successful, but most startup businesses aren't successful. So it's a risk, and it's a risk you may decide to take, but it's you have to do your homework and do your diligence and really believe in the company that you're going to and its future if you think you're going to get an economic windfall. Most people don't. Almost all of them don't, but they do. And I've known attorneys that have, and it can be a great thing when it happens. And also the other thing is it's very difficult to move to another in-house job. Most attorneys, like I talked to attorneys in New York City and Silicon Valley and stuff all day long. And a lot of them will spend years trying to get their first in-house job. And it depends on your practice here, of course, but they'll spend a lot of time. So it's actually much easier to get an in-house job when you're in a law firm than it is when you're in-house because you have fresh skills. It's considered that you're going to be hungrier. You're going to have transferable skills. You're still going to be hungry, and in-house jobs are not able really to train attorneys as well. So once you go in-house, it's much more difficult to get another in-house job than it is to get your first in-house job. So a lot of people don't realize that, but if you go in-house, the typical move is someone goes in-house. Some people will last a very short time, which means a matter of months. They will get there and it just will be a really bad fit for them and they can't believe how things are going. And I would say that happens to about 10% of the people. Another 20 to 30% don't last more than 6 to 9 months. And then another percentage of people will last 1 to 2 years and then they'll have to move jobs. And typically people will move around and it becomes very difficult to get another position. And then the next thing is, and move to different states. I see things all the time where people do stuff like, I move to some weird area of Colorado or some weird area of the state. They get up and they move their whole family and they get there and the company closes or they lose their jobs. It's difficult. Typically you're working for a company and the company has a CEO and the company has a COO. And if people don't like you, they'll just get rid of you. They want people that are going to help them grow the business. They don't want people that they feel are adverse to them. And there's just all sorts of other issues. And the other thing is your legal skills are likely to deteriorate once you go in-house. And so what that means is, again, like law firms are working on the most complex matters. In most law firms, there's a lot of oversight in terms of the type of work that's being done. Everyone's patrolling each other and making sure that the best work's being done. And then you're working for paying clients and they expect a certain type of work to be done. And you need to be on top of different trends and things in order to get clients and to impress clients because it's a paying market. And once you go in-house, you're typically not working on the most important matters. Those are done by outside law firms. And your skills as an attorney are likely to deteriorate. Most in-house attorneys become very good at handing off work to other in-house attorneys. So pretty much every in-house attorney that I've ever hired that's been an in-house attorney before has basically just had all these relationships with law firms, and all they're really interested in doing is rewarding and giving work to other people and not doing it themselves and finding reasons not to do the work. Whereas if I bring in a young attorney that is from a law firm, that they don't have all those relationships with law firms and they're more eager to do the work themselves. And that's actually better for the company because we save money and all sorts of things. But there's just different skills that an in-house attorney has. And over time, they become experts in giving away work and it becomes very political as opposed to doing the work. And it doesn't necessarily, and it doesn't help you. And that's one reason that law firms don't always in-house attorneys. And then the final thing is in many companies, you actually work much harder than you did in a law firm. You could work incredible hours in-house and you're suddenly working for the founders of the company or a high-level executive team. And you're working for people that are even more aggressive than the most aggressive attorneys in the largest firms. And they expect you. It's not uncommon for people to be expected to show up. I have people showing up in our company, BCG, for meetings at 6 a.m. This is just how it is when you're hard charging and interested in getting things done. And you actually may work as hard in-house. Many in-house companies also track their hours of their people, their companies. So they don't always give the attorneys the type of freedom that they would get in a law firm. They may have software that records how much time they're working if they work remotely and so forth. So it can be difficult. So that's an introduction to some of the issues with going in-house. And then I will now talk a little bit about a few of the issues these issues that I've brought up. But the first thing just be really aware of is it's very difficult once you go in-house to get a job with another law firm. And the thing I say to people all the time is in most states, regardless of where you are. I don't care if you're in rural, and it doesn't matter. There's tons of law firms. Law firms are in every city of the country. There's litigators in law firms, cities of 3,000 people. There's law firms everywhere. There's legal work everywhere if you want to work in a law firm. It's so prevalent. It's unbelievable. And the laws for getting a job in a law firm aren't really that difficult. You either need to have a specialized skill, which means doing one thing. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter where you went to law school. You could do trusting estates. You could do insurance defense. You could do sophisticated commercial litigation. If you have a skill, you could always get a position in a law firm. Now, if you have multiple skills and don't do anything very well, then you're going to have to work at a law firm you may not want to work in. For the most part, if you have a skill, you can always get a job. I know attorneys that have moved firms in their 80s that had multi-million-dollar books of business. And you can keep working. You can do this law firm game forever. It's in companies. Wow. You're talking about a whole different set of rules. And then if you want to stay in a large law firm or a mid-sized law firm, at some point, you probably need to get business or the prospect of business. Or if you don't have business, you need to maybe shoot a little lower and work for a smaller firm. But you can always get a job at another law firm. I'm telling you, if you're not able to get a job in a law firm, you just don't know what you're doing. And you should watch videos that I've done about it, but anybody can get in a law firm. There's law firms in any state you're in. There's thousands of law firms or tens of thousands. And just in Los Angeles, there's new law firms starting probably every hour of every day. There's thousands and thousands of them, and there's so many of them, and these law firms have work, and they need people to help them, and they have all different cultures and sizes and things and about them that make them good and bad. But the thing I want to say is that attorneys are contacting us all the time that have been in-house and many times want to go to a law firm again. And if they're coming from an in-house position, most law firms aren't interested. They don't care that the person went to some incredible school or they worked at this major firm before. Now, if the person is a year or two out of a major firm and in-house, they might not care. But for the most part, law firms don't want them because you're just sending the message that you're going to leave again, that you don't like this environment, that you're showing them that your skills are probably deteriorated, that you're not as interested in being in a law firm compared to other places. And everyone in a law firm knows that when someone goes to in-house, that person is going to leave again and doesn't like working in a law firm. And that's fine. It's not that you don't like working in a law firm, though. I would say it's probably the type of law firm you're in. And so if you ever go to in-house, the odds of you getting a job in a large law firm again are very slim. And so you just need to be aware of that. Now, you can get a job in a smaller law firm if you have skills. But the problem is most attorneys that go in-house typically will be doing a bunch of different things and work that's not as sophisticated as what a law firm does. Now, that's not always the case, but it is a lot. Now, during the late 90s to the first part of 2000, there's so many attorneys that went in-house and it's sort of going on again now. But I would say that one of the things that I saw was probably 65 to 70% of those attorneys who left law firms during that period of time. And this was during when there was a dot-com boom and all this stuff was going on. A significant percentage of the attorneys that left during that time lost their jobs in 18 months. And most of those people tried to return from those in-house jobs. And I would say 60% and had all sorts of reasons why they believed they made a mistake. And I would say out of those attorneys, we're talking about tens of thousands of people, very few of them ever will land at the jobs at the same prestige level. And I would say less than 50% were successful at getting a job in another law firm at all. And these were graduates from top law schools and coming from the best firms that had done this many times. You just need to think about this very carefully because if you go in-house, you're going someplace with, in most cases, unless it's a huge company, an unproven business model. Even General Electric, which used to be one of the safest places in the world to work, remember a couple of years ago was letting go like all of their attorneys. And you just don't know. Things change rapidly. Think about just in the span of the past few years, the companies that you've seen emerge and with the way things have happened, whether it's electric cars or different types of computer companies or cell phones, and just the world changes. And when it does, companies go out of business. Law firms typically just keep plugging along. And nothing changes. So if you're going to go to work for a company, you better be prepared that at some point is going to probably have problems and you're going to lose your job or it's going to get new management. So it's very difficult to get back. And so most attorneys that leave always think that the company they're joining is going to be great. And they think it's going to be, I don't know, but saying the next Yahoo, because Yahoo is not doing that well. But it's just it's just every year accomplished attorneys leave large law firms, go in-house, and then have a bad experience, and they try to return. And even in the best of times, companies will cut back on their legal departments, go out of business, they'll merge. The company will, when a CEO of a company or a general counsel of a company comes into a new role, when that switches over, companies always, they come in and they want to bring their own legal people. So I've known people that have been hired as a general counsel of a company, and then the CEO is replaced and that general counsel just sits there. The new CEO brings in his own general counsel, and then eventually they let the general counsel go. This kind of stuff happens all the time. And this sort of politics, it certainly exists in law firms, but it's just something to be aware of. Even if the economy isn't in bad condition, you're going to have a difficult time returning to a large law firm. It's just kind of how it works. And you need to understand it. And you need to understand how law firms work if you want to be part of them. And you need to understand that if you do work in a law firm and you choose to stay with it, that you literally can have a career easily into your 80s. I have an attorney representing me right now that I think is probably at least 85, and he's doing a good job. You have plenty of opportunity in a law firm. You don't find 85-year-old attorneys working in-house. If you go to a large law firm, you have to understand most law firms, how they work and the expectations and why that's a good business model. What typically happens and good for your career. If you go into a law firm, you're expected to specialize, especially in large law firms, fairly quickly. You're expected to become an expert in your practice area. You can do it in 5 years, but it typically takes, and this is another thing, to really know what you're doing as a corporate attorney, as a litigator. Most of the times it takes about 5 years just to even understand what you're doing. So going in-house before that time is usually a big mistake. Really have a lot of variety and challenges and things coming at you to develop good habits. And typically the better firm you're at, the better habits and work habits you'll develop. But you're expected to work hard for 7 to 11 or more years, develop skills. These skills involve relating to clients, communicating with people, make partner, take a counsel position, or move to a smaller firm as a partner, associate, or counsel. That's just kind of how the world works. In most large law firms, there's not a lot of opportunities. And when you're in a law firm, you're expected to constantly become better and better at your work, rise to better and better challenges. A litigator will first maybe do discovery, and then from discovery, they'll move on to writing parts of briefs, and then they may write a whole brief, and then they may go to do a deposition, and then they may go to court and argue as part of a motion, and then they may go to court and examine a witness in a trial, and then they may do their own trial, and then they may bring in clients. And there's a whole kind of developmental framework of how you develop as an attorney inside of a law firm, and there are greater and greater challenges. And it's the same thing with corporate and every other practice area. You're constantly being challenged to become better and more proficient and getting increased responsibility and developing your skills and so forth. And as you do that, your billing rate increases. You're supposed to get closer to clients. You're developing more contacts and a larger Rolodex of people you can leverage into portable business. You're developing management skills, training younger attorneys. And as you train them, you learn more about yourself and what you know. And then each step of the way, you're growing. And the firms are set up to make you grow. And then if you stop growing or you just can't cut it, then you have to leave. But even the largest law firms may require you bring in a giant public company in order to become a partner or stay a partner. So it's just, you have to keep growing. The bigger the firm and the more prestigious the firm, the bigger the challenge. And so growing is not bad. I don't understand sometimes why people want to quit growing. Growing is a good thing for you. And people pay money to be put in positions where they're growing. You're on this webinar right now because you're trying to grow, and you should be. This is very smart of you, by the way, to be on this webinar. Anybody that's trying to learn from someone that understands anything, it doesn't have to be me. You could go to someone else to learn how to get business. You go to someone else to become very good in your practice area, or other people, but learning about this stuff is important. And learning is important. And that's what a law firm does. And the law firms will try to make you the best you can be. And it's in their interest to do so. Young associates may work with mid-level to senior associates, and then those senior associates are being supervised by partners and ensure kind of everything is being funneled up the chain of command, and you're getting better and better as a consequence. And you don't even see it. If you're with a large law firm right now, all the stuff that's coming at you, that's annoying you and upsetting you and keeping you up at night is just trying to force you to be a better attorney. That's all it's doing. If you want to get off that path, that's fine. You can do that in a firm that maybe isn't as harsh or where you're a better fit. But everybody's trying to make you become a better attorney. And that's one of the things that law firms do for you. And becoming better at something is a tool you can use. If you're 25 years old and frustrated by being in a law firm, think about all this stress and stuff that you're learning and how good you're going to be 30 years from now or 40 years from now. And 40 years from now, 65 years old, most attorneys are still working. So all of these systems of a lot of law firm attorneys are still working at 65. Every step of the way, there's checks and balances. The law firms are trying to ensure you have the best work product. This is creating good lawyers. And then once you go in-house, you're just on your own. All of that stops. And there's no, if you're working right now at a major law firm, say you're working at a good law firm, Sidley and Austin's a good law firm, for example. If you're working at Sidley and Austin, they're going to have all these checks and balances for their major clients. And they're going to make sure that to the extent they can, that the best work is done. And that's going to over time create a good brand in the marketplace and make good lawyers. And people know what an attorney that comes out of that firm or another good Mayor Brown, another good firm. People know what it means to come out of one of those good Chicago firms, for example, and they know the quality of work, and they know if someone's been there 5 or 6 years, what they're going to be like and how the expectations. But unfortunately, that same thing does not happen in-house. No one has any idea what it means to work at a certain startup or the type of work that you're doing in-house. There's no checks and balances in most of them. And you may say, well, my department is led by a former partner of Skadden Arps. It's such a great department that I work in this in-house company. And that may be true. But unfortunately, that just there's just not that hard and fast rule. And the thing is, your work quality, what's funny about going in-house is the job of the lawyer, outside counsel, is to make the in-house attorney feel good about themselves, because then they'll get more work. So even you can turn in the biggest piece of crap work as an in-house attorney to your law firm, and many times that law firm will praise it and say what good it is, and they'll tell your bosses what good work you do and stuff. So your work is not going to be criticized, and you're not going to be held to high standards. In-house attorneys really represent people to be flattered and to a threat to getting work being given to the law firm, but also an opportunity to get more work. Once you go in-house, you may be in an authority position like that for your ego, but at the same time, you're not going to be challenged as much. And there's a lot of exceptions. Many major companies in New York, Silicon Valley, Midwest, there's hedge funds and all sorts of people that need very specialized types of attorneys. And that's perfectly fine. And they do hire specialized attorneys. And so there are exceptions. And there's real estate companies that hire people that only do leases and different types of companies. But for the most part, once you go in-house, the odds are that you're going to be more of a generalist than a specialist. And as I said to you earlier, the reason law firm attorneys are most often marketable is because most of them have some sort of specialty. There's a lot of practice areas. And there's something like, in terms of the ones that I just look at when I classify an attorney, I have over 75. And there's even more than that. But the idea of being a generalist means that that's just not going to appeal to law firms. So law firms want specialists, because if you're a specialist, that means they can go to their client and say, this person does this branch of healthcare law, and that's why they're worth this amount of money per hour. And they're going to save you time, and they understand it. Clients want experts. They don't want generalists, and generalists take time to learn. It's not good use of their money. They may not have interest in the practice area. They can be outmaneuvered by attorneys that are specialists as opposed to generalists. If I go up against a patent attorney with no knowledge of patent law, I'm going to just die. I'm going to lose whatever patent competition, or it just doesn't make any sense. While you may believe it's interesting to participate in different types of work, this is just going to make you increasingly unmarketable, and it's going to make you of less service to your clients. You're always better off being a specialist because you'll understand something in a lot of depth. And when you go up against competing attorneys, you'll be able to get a better edge and then get a better result for your clients. And so when you go in-house, you're really jeopardizing the growth that law firms expect attorneys to demonstrate throughout their careers. Law firms want you to be committed to the way they practice law. And it doesn't demonstrate that commitment. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the importance of specialization, of being trained, of challenging yourself and growing. And you're just putting yourself on a path that, frankly, lawyers over in law firms don't respect as much. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying that you should feel like you're making a mistake, because I think going in-house is a great opportunity for a lot of people, especially if it's for the right firms. But there's tons of people that go in-house and go back to law firms. And just some examples, patent prosecutors, I placed them from in-house to law firms constantly. I have them interviewing every week. I have real estate attorneys. I have corporate attorneys are less rare, but it does happen. There's people from healthcare that are in hospitals and things can do it sometimes. There's lots of people that can do it in different types of roles. And there's some very important general counsel roles where you may be at Disney or General Motors or something along those lines where you could potentially go back. But in most cases, it's very difficult and it's not as easy. But if you have very good contacts, then you can potentially do it. So those are just some things to think about and why giving up a law firm can be a mistake for you. And it's something to realize that it's just everybody listening to this, you're making a very good decision, use of your time, because you need to understand these things. And you need to weigh a decision to go in-house against all these things and just make sure you understand that. The economic windfall argument I bring up because I think a lot of people believe that they are going to have economic windfalls. And I know several attorneys that I hired one once that went in-house and got, I think, $4 million. And he was in worked there for 2 or 3 years and then wound up with 2 after taxes. And so stories like that become very appealing to an attorney. And a lot of the reasons for the salary increases, when I was back in the 90s, the salaries of attorneys in the big firms were, they were around 85 of the starting salaries up until around 2000. Then what happened is there was a firm in Silicon Valley called Gunderson that was losing all of its associates to in-house companies because of this promise of potentially making all this money. So they raised their salary to 120, and then all the other firms followed. And then some point along the line, they raised them to 135, and the salaries just kept increasing because there was all this competition for in-house jobs, because people did want to have the opportunity to participate in this lottery of stock options, which is a good thing for a lot of people, and you can do well. And so those stories circulate very widely. The stories of people that don't do well when that happens don't circulate as widely, but these stories certainly just circulate. And then everyone is jealous and wants to be part of it. And they'll say, oh, I was a better attorney than that person. Why did they happen to them? And so it happens, and it's still happening. And we don't do a lot of in-house placements here, but I have attorneys that, that I've placed and that I know other people have that have gone in-house and have done well with stock options. Now, it's rare, but it does happen. It happens a lot more often, though, that someone gets a multi-million-dollar windfall in a law firm when they win a case, but people don't talk about that as much. You actually can do very well. I've had people work for me the only people that I've had actually work for me that have had these multi-million-dollar windfalls is I had one guy come to work for me that he was an in-house litigator, and he decided he wanted to set up his own practice and went to personal injury law. And he's done hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements. Not how much of that he's cleared, but he's done very well, at least according to his website, and which is much more than anybody would do in-house, assuming he's getting 40% of that. And those statements he's making are true, which I believe they are. He's probably doing very well. And then again, the corporate attorneys are the ones that are always most at risk. Corporate attorneys become very marketable to law firms when the economy is doing well. And they become marketable because companies want them, and then law firms want them. And they often are receiving just lots and lots of calls from recruiters. And if you're a corporate attorney listening to this during a good economy, how active things are. And a lot of times these corporate attorneys will go in-house and they'll flock to these startup companies, the belief that their skills will make them rich. But the problem is these stories are not as common as people would like to believe. And I'd say probably 1 in 50 attorneys that leave a prestigious law firm ever end up making more money in-house than they would have made if they stayed in a law firm. But some of them actually can do very well. You can make, as a general counsel of a big company, millions of dollars a year, more than you probably would make in a law firm. So you can do very well. I'm not in any way discounting it, because you can do well, and I'm not. But it's tough. It's tougher than a law firm because a lot of it is dependent on luck. It's dependent on the luck of the company being the right company, of having the right man. Whereas if you have a big book of business, you can go to work at most law firms and do that. And it's not as dependent on luck. It's dependent on you being able to bring in the business And so just the point is to think about from a cost benefit analysis that you have this big risk of going in-house to make all this money. And you can make it. Again, I don't want to in any way discount it because I've seen it. And if you stick with your law firm job your whole career and you enjoy practicing law, then you probably don't want to retire because you'll just like work. And if you find something you enjoy, going in-house for 5-6 years and maybe making a lot of money or not, but not being able to go back to a law firm and participate in that is a big risk because lawyers' salaries keep rising. They keep going up. They've more than doubled over the past 20 years. So over the next 20 years, if starting attorneys are making at the high end $200,000 now, they'll be making $400,000 in 20 years. And so just think about that, then the fact that things keep going up in law firms and the opportunities keep going on there. And I would say that most people that stay in law firms are in a position to be financially independent after a couple of decades. You can do well in a law firm. And the thing is with the law firm is you typically could stay there. So you could stay in the law firm as long as if you're forced to leave a major law firm, you can always go to a smaller law firm or a smaller market and get a job. And you just can't do that when you're in-house. You don't have necessarily the same skills. And very few attorneys ever make money with stock options and that sort of thing inside of law firms. And there's just a lot of money to be made in law firms. And there's a lot of opportunities to be made. I know people that, and just so you understand how much money you can make in law firms, I know people that are just, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but they're nerds and they're people that you wouldn't think would be, that you would get together with them and they would want to play video games. They have skills. They know how to, they network with a few people and they're able to bring in business. And if you bring in business, it's really not that hard. Once you learn the skills, you can take courses, you can watch webinars that I've done. But if you bring in a few $1 million in business at a firm, you typically can be, and it's not that hard, even if you're in a mid-sized firm, you bring in a couple $1 million in business, you're guaranteed in most firms to take home, the range is 20 to 50% of what you're billable, what you're doing. But typically the average is about 1/3. So if you have a $2 million book of business, you're making $600,000 or $700,000, but you may be making $1 million. If you get 3 million, you should be making over $1 million. And then if you're an equity partner, so you can make a lot of money working in law firms, a ton of money. And it's not that hard. One litigation case can pay for a lot. One of the things I've seen a lot of people do, I'm just trying to get you guys thinking how to think about all this, but I've seen like a lot of commercial litigators become divorce attorneys from big firms. A divorce can cost millions of dollars just for one client. A trial in a divorce is typically $250,000, $500,000. A good portion of that is legal fees. Divorce is one. Trust in the states is another. There's so many practice areas that anyone can go into. I know someone who's an immigration attorney that she went to I think a local law school in Los Angeles, Southwestern, and couldn't get a job after she graduated because she was from Southwestern. And not at the top of her class. And she has a $5 million a year immigration practice, doing very well and makes a lot of money. So it's not that hard if you learn this law firm game. You just have to learn it. And so if you're trying to make money, the odds of making money as a lawyer in a law firm are huge, or in your own law firm. You can do unbelievably well. And there's all sorts of ways to learn these practice areas. There's courses on how to be a trusted estates attorney. There's courses on you can do it on your own. You can do it in a law firm. And we used to do a lot more in-house attorney placements. We still do. And I don't mind doing them, but I don't think they're bad. I just think it's important that people understand what a law firm offers compared to an in-house job. I wanted to tell a story about an in-house job that just a meeting with a startup company. And it's not an atypical type of story. And there's just a lot of short-sightedness. And so people need to understand kind of the consequences. So in 2000, I was invited to a very important Bay Area law firm to come to a meeting that was being held by one of its clients. This was a long time ago, but the company was looking for a general counsel and had invited me to the meeting as a recruiter to learn more about the company and to help them with a search. And they dealt with the accounting industry, and they'd been started by a guy from Russia who had made a bunch of money illegally importing cigarettes into Russia without stamps on them and then creating fake stamps that were saying that he paid taxes, so you can believe it. But this company had recently received $10 million from a venture capital firm just on the idea that he was going to have some sort of virtual accounting firm. I don't remember what it was, but the meeting started early in the morning, and throughout the day, a former U.S. senator and a major partner of a major international accounting firm and several partners in this particular law firm enthusiastically talked about the company, exchanged ideas about how to take over the world. And the law firm, of course, was also charging this guy by the hour. So they were all sitting there just trying to keep the meeting going. And they had significant stock options, and everyone in the room did too. And I was going to get paid in stock options as well. And they'd even hired someone to write a business plan and given him stock options. But about 6 hours in the meeting, and again, I'm in this meeting, I'm very young. So it doesn't matter how old I was, but I was certainly in my 20s and listening to this and thought the whole thing was ridiculous after about 6 hours. And I said, if I understand correctly, the idea was it was going to be a reverse bid system for accounting. So I said, if I understand correctly, this company is going to allow anybody in the country to post the fact that your tax return's done, and accountants are going to bid on the right. And whoever has the lowest price is going to be the one that gets to do it. And then you're going to charge a fee. And the guy that founded it said, yes, and he was very enthusiastic about it. And he said the people will put their credit cards here to charge the tax return immediately once the auction's over. And they'll take a 5% fee or something, the other 95 to the accountant, and then they'll make money off this float. So they were anticipating that this thing would just take over the world, and this float was going to be millions of dollars a year, and that 5% of the people with access to computer and will use it. And then I said, are people going to have the right to choose their account? And they said, no, it's a free market. The lowest price account will be the one who does the work. And people will also have to, the ability to set the highest price they're willing to pay. If you think about that, the idea is that the lowest price accountant was going to be the one that does the work. And for me, if you think about it, that actually makes no sense. Why would you hire the cheapest accountant to have an auction site that, where the people are bidding down the price of your tax return until you get someone that's willing to do it at the lowest possible rate? You could obviously get someone that's not very good and needs work, and it didn't make any sense. So I didn't believe it would ever work. I explained that to them, and then a fourth-year attorney that was inside the firm at the time ended up going privately. The founder begging for the job, and he worked as a general counsel with stock options. He took the job for $60,000 a year. At the time, I think he was making maybe $130,000. 4 months later, the company reduced the salary to $30,000 because it told him it no longer had the money because no one was signing up for the service. And then with 9 months, he was let go. The company went out of business, and there were no stock options, no tax returns. And I don't think a single person ever participated in this thing, even though they spent millions of dollars in advertising. And this thing stuff still happens all the time. I had a candidate just a few months ago that got a very well-paying job doing patent work in a law firm in Silicon Valley for, patent litigation, a $300,000 year plus job. He got a offer from his friend that was starting a company to go work there. And within 4 months, the company was out of business. And he had the same idea that the company was such a great idea. It was going to take over the world. But the same attorney then tried to go back and get a position with the law firm. He couldn't get a position with the law firm because no one was interested in an attorney that had just left like that and basically taken his firm's client and gone to work with them. He wasn't successful. And then he accepted a part-time contract position with a publishing company doing in-house work for $35 an hour. And then several months after that, he moved back to work with his parents in, it was Vancouver, I believe, and to basically be a real estate agent. And this is someone that had gone to an Ivy League law school and was on the fast track. And this kind of story is not unique. I see these stories all the time. And so I want you to be aware of, when you see these great ideas and things that sound good, you have to be very careful because a lot of people get in trouble this way. And it happens with astonishing regularity. And law firms do not welcome you back after you make this mistake. You can take this risk, and maybe going to work for this company would have been smart for people, but so many people have this result. And so I really want to warn you because you need to understand that this can happen, and it happens a lot, all the time. I'm always working with attorneys, and I get them great jobs, and they say I'm going in-house, and then invariably they come back, not invariably, but a large percentage of the time, and they say something along the lines of, oh, the company lost funding, or the company did this. Think about all these companies that are out there and the fraud you're reading about in the papers all the time. Every day I read about some company fraud or something, some company thing happened, and it can be very scary. I knew an attorney at General Motors that was part of a litigation group, and they fired a whole 10 or 15 attorneys because there was some problems with seatbelts, and they had nothing to do with it, but they were in charge of responding to an early lawsuit or something and didn't, I don't know. All sorts of things can happen. And those people couldn't get jobs either. So at least around Detroit. But the point is, a lot of people still seem to want to go in-house and think they're going to make a lot of money. And it's just very dangerous. And it's just something you need to understand that it doesn't always end well. And most large law firms, by the way, when attorneys are in large firms, they'll say things like, oh, the morale's really low, or there's problems with the firm, or they just lost this client, or all the partners are leaving. But these law firms have been around in many cases for 100 years or decades. They'll be fine. Law firms do go out of business, but when a law firm goes out of business, it's front page news because it's so rare. They're selling basically labor at a huge markup. And when a company goes out of business, I mean, companies go out of business every day, but it's very rare for law firms. Most of them don't, especially the larger law firms. And full service law firms are also very good places to work. One of the reasons law firms are set up the way they are is because clients need the service, but also because they support each other during slow time. Litigation could be slower, bankruptcy could be slower, IP could be slow, and then other practice areas pick up the slack. And then there's a diversity of clients. So there's not just one or two clients, it's a bunch of clients. And so that diversity of work can help. But think about the companies that you may be aware of that have gone out of business during your lifetime and that have been eclipsed by new business models and new ways of doing things. The business model of the law firm hasn't changed. I don't think there's going to be any major changes. And it's just the way it is. And it's a much safer career alternative. It's just a monumental event when things go out of business, when a law firm goes out of business. So I just would say that as you're evaluating in-house opportunities, as people are asking you to work in in-house companies, just remember that anything that produces a lot of economic value and generally does so over an extended period of time. You can't come up with an idea for, I don't know, like a delivery service or something and some small idea and not expect that someone else is going to be able to wipe it out and take it off the map very quickly. Most businesses that survive, like law firms and companies, have tried and true business models. And there's a thing like with Amazon, for example, like if Amazon sees someone emerging in their space, we'll just start a business and take them out. If it's a business that makes something or does something that they believe is competitive, they'll do it themselves. And so you just need to be very careful, especially about companies that aren't well-funded and don't have very strong management teams. You just need to look out for. I just want you to really consider this stuff because I'm trying to help you just because of what I've seen. And that's one reason I'm talking so much about this, because I care about the people that I help. That you don't have to get a job through me and get any way you want. But I just make these decisions through the lens of knowing that there's a lot of danger and knowing the positives of a law firm. And then finally, this is a very important part too. I think an attorney believes that there's two places you can work in-house, or you can work in a law firm, or you can work in the government or something else. But most people believe that once they go in-house, it's going to be easy to find another in-house job. And just think about, if you've been looking for an in-house job or you know people that have, think about how long they've been looking. Most people take a long time looking for in-house jobs, or at least finding the right one. But it's much harder to get an in-house job after you've been in-house than it is when you're in-house. Now, there are some exceptions to that. If you're in the same industry and they need someone like you, then it may be good. Like, for example, if you're like a privacy attorney at Facebook and Google needs a privacy attorney in-house, and then it may be a little bit easier to move if you have some sort of skill like that. But for the most part, it becomes very difficult. The law firms want to hire people, in-house companies want to hire people from law firms. The reason is because their skills are fresh and the people know what they're doing, and they don't have this kind of mentality of giving work to other people outside the company yet, which they pick up. And then the people they really like to hire are the people that are inside the law firms already doing their legal work. So if you're a company and you're paying your attorney in a law firm $800 an hour, and you can get them to come to work for you for, I don't know, $200,000 a year, that's a pretty good deal, right? You're saving $1.4 million and getting all the legal and doing all the work. That is how companies think. And they want to hire people that they're familiar with, that they have established relationships with, and that they already trust and they think are going to provide them the same level of service in-house as they did when they were in the law firm. And the idea of bringing these people in that they know and trust is great. So this is the most common hire, by the way. It's companies hiring people from their law firms. And and if you're not getting a job that way, then you may wonder that it's also a little bit riskier. And that, by the way, is typically the best way to get a job, because if you do go to work for a client and that client is more likely to protect you, you're already going to have a relationship, you're going to have a better understanding of the work styles, and things are just going to go better. But the problem with going in-house is companies go out of business all the time, and business models change. There's this process of creative destruction, and look at just what's happened to malls. Look at what's happened to all these businesses when things change. Movie theaters, like different businesses are just always changing, and they'll always be changing. And so if you go to work in a certain type of company, then the odds are that company is going to have problems. And you just can't rely on staying with a certain in-house company in your career. In-house companies want typically to hire people from the law firms they're working with, or if they don't, they want to hire people coming from law firms that have fresh skills and that are hungry. And that's typically the way it works. And if you take a job with people you don't know, it can be very risky, especially if the company's not established. And think about how often CEOs change and so forth. The other day with I don't know, the CFO of a big auto company, and she was telling me how that this auto company had 3 CEOs in the past 18 months. Companies have to get their direction, and then when a new CEO comes in, they want to bring their own people. It's very dangerous. And so if you lose your job in-house, you're often going to need to start tracking down new jobs on your own. And that's tough. If you move to wherever you move, people might move to Sacramento, California, or you might move to Omaha, Nebraska, which actually has some good companies. And you'll buy a house, you have kids in the school and so forth. If you take a job in-house, you have to be pretty confident that you're going to be there a long time, because it's not going to be easy for you to find another job in Omaha, Nebraska, or Sacramento, California, if you lose your job. And then your kids will be in school, you may have a mortgage, and it's scary. So a lot of attorneys that go in-house and not with their clients, many spend years searching for jobs before they find one. And it can be very difficult. So it's just something to think about. In addition, a lot of attorneys that the associate level are often very eager to work in-house. And so that's just something, else to think about. And they're much more enthusiastic than you may appear when you come in. The level of enthusiasm and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and when you're young is much different than when you start getting older and in your competitive market where your skills aren't as fresh, where you're a little tired. And so the law firm attorneys are much more interesting to most in-house companies. And just think about it. I see all of these, and I hate to bring it up, but I see all of these stories that, in my opinion, are just terrible. Is when people leave these huge law firms, these great law firms, and then they take these in-house jobs and they move their whole family, and they get there and the company closes or they get fired, and this happens so much. It certainly happens with law firms too, but then at least if you lose your job in a law firm, it's usually you can find a job fairly quickly. You should see, when you look for jobs on job boards, you'll always see a lot more law firm jobs than in-house jobs. If it's a law firm, $100,000 to $200,000 people, if it's a city, that big, there's going to be more than 100 law firms, typically much more than that, of more than 10 attorneys. And there's just a lot of law firms out there. But then there'll be maybe as few as 10 companies that employ in-house attorneys. And the number of attorneys that they hire is going to be pretty low. And they don't know how to manage attorneys. They don't know how to hire attorneys. They don't understand it. And I understand hiring attorneys because I'm an attorney and I run placement firm, but at the same time, most firms don't. And then most companies don't. And then the other thing is once you go in-house, your skills are likely to deteriorate. And I brought this up earlier, but it's actually a very serious problem. Most in-house attorneys learn very early on that they can convince their supervisors and others to allow outside people to do the work. This means that they don't have to work as hard. And it also means that they can take responsibility, that they don't have to worry about getting in trouble for things being done improperly. And so they really become experts in giving work to law firms, and the law firms are flattering them and so forth when they give them work and taking them out, and they give them more and less work is done. So it's not to say that in-house attorneys don't work, because a lot of them work extremely hard. As a matter of fact, I've seen in-house attorneys hired by major law firms that they were doing work for because the law firms were just amazed at how hard they work. But it's rare and it's not as common. And most companies are smart enough to know that if they have a serious matter, which would be an IPO, serious litigation, bet the company, serious transactions and things happening, they're not going to use their in-house attorneys. They're going to use law firms that they trust and that they believe are going to do good work. And if there's significant litigation, in almost all cases, it's going to go to a big firm or someone that's an expert. And there's just a lot of learning and refinement that comes in a law firm. And so I just bring this up just very quickly because most in-house attorneys, that the problem is, I'll tell you some example. I'll just tell you one interesting example. So I had a company that was, I don't know, down south somewhere. I think it was maybe Mississippi or something. And they were looking for in-house person to do patent litigation for them because they made these toys, and then the toys were, it was a toys, I don't know, they made this, maybe it was car parts, but anyway, they made something and then people would knock them off. And even though they were patented, they needed to sue the people that had copied them because they would just copy the part and they would make it in China and bring it over. So they had a job of people suing people full time. And these were routine suits, so they would always win. But they just needed attorneys in a little legal department to do all the suing because the violations are pretty clear, these patent violations and the cases. And so they contacted me to find them people, and the job didn't pay very much. It was in a small town where the company was located. It paid maybe a couple of $100,000 a year. But to my surprise, I was getting these partners from major U.S. law firms in New York and Chicago and all over. And the people that I was talking to were going into the company and they were saying, well, this is what I would do. I would farm this type of case out to this firm. And the company kept saying, like, listen, we need someone that's going to do the work. We want someone that's going to do the work. But the people weren't listening. They're saying, well, I can do the work, but I don't think it's in your best interest. And so this is what all the people that were interviewing were saying. And they were looking forward to basically going in-house and farming. The person I remember that they ultimately hired for this position was a guy that had been a partner in a law firm, didn't have any business, had been laid off and had been not working for 6 months and was hungry as hell. And older, and I don't know, he had some personal problems but he very grateful for the opportunity and went there and did great. So law firms most in-house people want people to do the work. But a lot of times when people go in-house, they don't want to do the work. They think it's a way to stop working. And this is the way a lot of in-house legal departments work. Now, it's not how they all work. There's some great companies like Amgen around here and other companies where they really do good work. And it's not. But for the most part, your skills are going to deteriorate. Law firms do the most important work, and that's a problem. Okay. And then you're also many times on the business side of things. So you're thinking about how to run a business, not practicing law, and helping out and advising people along those lines. And then the final thing is just you may have to work as hard when you go in-house as you did in a law firm. And with few exceptions, in-house often don't have to work as hard. And it is a good reason for going in-house. The work may not be as exciting. Many times your days aren't going to fly by like they do in a law firm, but you may not have billable hours. A lot of in-house companies do require billable hours, but you may have more predictable hours, and it's many times not as stressful. I will tell you that working in a law firm, in my opinion, can be very stressful, especially if you're not the right personality type for it, or you're in the wrong law firm. And many times the stress you're experiencing is just because of the law firm you're in. One thing I do talk about a lot, and I try to mention this as often as I can, is when I was I did a clerkship in a city called Bay City, Michigan, which is next to Midland, Michigan, which is where Dow Chemical is. And it's not a very big town, but there's a federal courthouse there. But I remember all of the attorneys, there was a whole group of kind of young attorneys, not a lot of them, maybe 6 or 7 that had graduated from law school around the same time I did, that had all taken jobs at local law firms. And they were all practicing years later, and they from those towns and nearby. They were all practicing, most of them in law firms, the same law firm they were in. Whereas and they'd been partners and seemed relatively happy. And you look at their pictures on their websites and they look happy. And then there were people that I knew that had gone to the same courthouse or had gone to work in big law firms in big cities. And most of those people that I know are no longer practicing law. So I think it depends on the environment you're in, but many times a smaller law firm, smaller environment where people aren't killing themselves can be a better place for you. It's just so, the big firm it can be very stressful. The big companies can be very stressful too. And I do think that many large law firms can, because of the pressure, depending on the firm and the culture, there's high divorce rates, high substance abuse rates. Kids can be screwed up because they're not seeing their parents. And so there's a lot of problems with big law firms. And these may be the things that you're struggling with as you're thinking about going in-house is the type of law firm that you're in, and you're watching the lives of the partners there and so forth, or your peers, or seeing what's become of you and not liking it, and seeing what's become of your kids. But that's not the reason that you need to suddenly go to work in-house and changing the type of law firm you're in. But an in-house environment could definitely give you your life back. And then it's a move that a lot of people make. But the thing is that every in-house position is not like that. And there's often a ton of pressure, especially if you're a general counsel of a company and the company's going through a lot of turmoil, which most companies do. And the largest companies, by the way, the general counsels will work extremely hard. They're not looking for a lifestyle job. The best companies will only keep the people around that work the hardest and are contributing the most. It's like that in any way. You can't escape the fact that it's a free market and companies have their best interest and want to get the hardest working best people. It's just like that. Unless the company is coasting, then it's not going to be a good move for you, because you may get your free time, but you're also going to be the first person to be let go. And that's the other thing too, is when the economy slows down or when the company slows down, the in-house attorneys are often the first to go because they're a cost center. They're not bringing in profit. And then you also typically, if you're billing a lot of hours, you don't have a record for bonuses. And so that's just something to think about. And you should be careful. You should be concerned about the environment and what it's like. And you can typically read a lot about what a law firm's like online, but you can't always read about what the in-house legal environment is where you're going. So that's something to think about. And many in-house attorneys are under a lot to do work as opposed to farm it out, depending on the company. And each company is run differently. And the problem is you never know this until you get there. But the management could change, all sorts of things could change. And it could be very unpredictable, and it can be difficult. But one of the things I would say is that for the most part, I think that you just need to make sure that wherever you're going and talking to, that you understand the situation. If you are going to go in-house, that you do realize you may not have to work as hard, that going in-house to get less work or to develop your career is not always the right thing, that you're not going to necessarily get wealthy doing it. And that the reality is that if you're working for good people, they're always going to expect you to do good work, and the distinctions aren't going to be the same. And you're also in-house. The only other things I wanted to say is you're a cost center, and you're not necessarily integral to the operation of the company. The in-house attorneys will prevent things from happening, and they're what I call the resident buzzkills, meaning that they will tell the CEO and different people trying to get things done that they can't do it. And because of that, they become disliked. And then many times the CEOs and others trying to run the company won't like them because they're standing in the way of them growing the business and getting stock options and things, or increasing the stock price and that sort of things. These are just things to think about. And some of the things about going in-house that are as good. One of our recruiters was recently corresponding with a friend that received an in-house position. The attorney was 3 years out of an Ivy League law school and working for one of the top 2 or 3 firms in the country. And he said, "Are you sure about going in-house?" And he said, "I don't think going in-house is good for a lawyer level." And he said, "You'll be making a decision to be an employee rather than a business owner, and to turn your control over your destiny to board of directors and stockholders rather than controlling it yourself. And you'll limit your upside drastically." So think about that. When you're in a law firm, you are a business owner. What you are is when you get more senior, you try to bring in your own business, and then the law firm for providing a brand and for providing associates and other things is basically you're owning your own business. You can take your clients elsewhere. You have control over your destiny. Even the most dislikable partners, as long as they're not doing anything criminal, or they always can move to other firms when they have business. And so you have control over your financial and personal destiny when you're in a law firm. And then to come back to a law firm after leaving in-house is almost impossible. So you should think about that option and think about what you can do. It's almost, I don't know if I like this analogy, but it may be reversible. You better be sure about it anyway. And I when I was working on this, I got a call from a guy that had left a big firm as a 4th year to go in-house at a major company. And then that company had changed its general counsel 5 months later and was out of a job. And the general counsel wanted to farm the work out. So it's for him to take him back. And I had to tell him he couldn't get a job. So this just happens all the time. And the thing I always recommend before you go in-house or take it seriously is just looking at every possible other option you can first. One of those options may be different types of law firms. You should research the law firms. It's very easy to do research on Google, other sorts of things now. And then you should ask yourself, when you go into your in-house interviews, what has happened to people that have been in the position before? How many people have been in this job? How often do you replace it? What is the growth opportunity? Is there growth opportunity? Because you need to understand that. And you need to understand a lot of times in in-house positions, people will go into it and they'll just rotate through people constantly. And so you need to understand that. And what role does the in-house counsel have in the company? Because the problem is that the thing I don't like about going in-house a lot of times is it's almost like when you're in law school, many people have the goal of going to work for a big firm. That's their big thing, is they want to go to work for the biggest firm they can and make as much money as they can. And that's not always the smartest way of doing things, because you don't know what you're getting into. It's the same thing when attorneys get into law firms, is they think their goal wants to go in-house, but they don't know what they're getting into. So you need to understand that. So I just encourage you to, if you're considering a career change, to just make sure you think about the things I'm talking about today. I would read other articles I've read about it. And again, other people, their job, if a recruiter's recruiting for an in-house job, their job is to emphasize the positives of it. And there are a lot of positive stories about in-house positions. And I've seen resumes of people that have gone in-house and been places 10 years and had very good careers. But you also need to understand what you're getting into. And it could be the perfect decision, but you do need to be aware of the negatives, and you need to be able to maximize your self-interest and the longevity of your career, which I think is most important, and the skills you're getting. All right, well, I'm going to take a quick break. This is a long presentation. I apologize that it was so long, and just as many questions as everyone has, I'm happy to answer. Answering questions is actually the favorite part of my week, because there's so many good questions. You can ask questions about going in-house. You can ask questions about anything. I never show names or anything, so all the questions are anonymous, and I'll answer pretty much any question you have. It doesn't have to be about this presentation, but we'll take a quick break for maybe 5 minutes. It's 11:30 here and 11:26, so I'll be back by 11:31, which is 2:30 in the East Coast, and back to me. Thanks. All right, so let's go to questions. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to stop the share, and then I will open a Word document so we can do questions on there. And honestly, any questions you guys have about anything related to your careers are helpful. I thought last week I was just going to say some people asked some really good questions about, there was one I liked about, post-traumatic stress disorder. And so just things along those lines can be very helpful for other people that may be going through the same thing. So typically, if you have some issues, the odds are that other people may have the same issues too. So it's always useful. So thanks for the tips. Is there a caveat of prosecution on this? Yeah. So there's a lot of very good departments for patent prosecution. Patent prosecution is an exception for in-house. Many times you can actually, and the reason is that the work you do, meaning the patent, speaks for itself. It shows your talent, all sorts of things. Most patent attorneys that go in-house do have a decent opportunity to transition over. That's especially when the patent attorney when you've developed really good experience, working for someone. Fortunately, law firms can analyze that and see that. And there's a lot of places that do patent prosecution. And I've seen people from in-house do that. Okay, let's see. And then this question was, can you please talk about some large size in-house patent department jobs? So most companies, there's a bunch of different things to think about with patent. So with whether it's Amazon or Microsoft or those companies, most large companies, Apple, all have in-house patent departments. They'll also many times have patent departments, attorneys, obviously, that do it outside. Most technology companies and most biotech companies will have their own patent departments. So one example I gave was just like Amgen, which is, literally down the street from where I work, and they have a huge patent department that does biotech. So the way to find those patent department jobs is typically, many times you can just apply to the firm or write someone that seems like they do the work you do and ask if they have any open, or call them or connect with them on LinkedIn. So most big companies do have, especially technology, biotech, will have patent related work, and they don't always advertise their jobs. So you can often just find them by contacting them. And if you have related experience, you're often going to be in good shape. So I don't think it's too difficult to find in-house patent jobs. I think that's what you want to do, but you basically need to have the type of experience doing the type of work they do. The best way to find an in-house patent job would often be to ask yourself, what kind of work are you doing? And then see, does the firm have experience? Does the company, what companies do that kind of work? And then it's usually not too hard to get a position. Okay, if you accept an offer, say in the in-house or government, later get a better preferred offer, how do you rag on the first offer? There's no way of doing this, but due to the time constraint and the possibility the preferred job may not come through, I might have to accept. What's the best approach? What are the consequences? Unfortunately, this is something that a lot of people do now, and I'm not saying unfortunately. In any job search, I even tell this to my own candidates, you need to look out for your self-interest. What is your self-interest? You need to do what's best for you. So what is best for you? If burning bridges is okay with you and that's not going to do long-term harm to your career, burning bridges may be the best thing. The consequences are going to be, if you get a bad reputation in a smaller market of turning down offers and things, then people will not talk to you again. But if your offer is much better, that's preferred, then you have to be careful. But you need to just evaluate your own self-interest. And unfortunately, I tell people the same thing. If they get an offer and they don't think it's in their best interest, then you shouldn't take it. Or if something comes through and it's not through me, but it's better for you, you need to take it. That's just how it works. You need to do what's in your best interest. So people have, and what is your best interest is another question. So what is your best interest? So your best interest is, I was working on something related to this today. You have functional, which is things like pay, benefits, close to home. I don't know. And then you have social, you have emotional, just people you work with. Oh, this is the type of work. Emotional, and the other ones would just be, I don't know, happiness. I don't know, functional, emotional. So there's just, you have to think in terms of everything. And then you have short-term benefits, long-term. So you have to short-term versus long-term. A lot of people will emphasize money when they're searching. And I honestly think that's one of the dumbest things you can emphasize. Just thinking in terms of a long-term career, like where could you be? Where could you spend the majority of your career? Where would you be happier over the long term? What provides the most work? What is going to make you the most happy? So you have to look at all these factors, and that really will determine what's in your best interest. So I always encourage people to think this way, because you have to do what's in your best interest. And sometimes that means upsetting people. But I would say your self-interest, there goes my camera. I don't understand that. Now it's, oh, here it comes. It's coming back probably. Give me a second. Give me 1 second. I don't know why this happens. It happens a lot of times during a lot of webinars. There we go. So you have to think your self-interest is really paramount, and you have to look at that, and you shouldn't make people more important than you. And then the final thing is the question is what makes you happy? So I just ask, the reason I'm bringing all this up is because I think a lot of times people give a lot more credence to what makes other people happy than themselves. And you have to really worry about what makes you the happiest. And so I would say, look at all these things. The consequences could be negative, and you could upset some people. If you're in a smaller market, you may never be able to work at that place again, but you just never know. Okay. These are great questions, by the way. I really appreciate everyone asking these questions. Last week we had some great questions, but these are good questions too. So thank you for asking these. The reason these questions you guys are asking are so helpful is because a lot of other people have the same questions. And a lot of these questions, you're positioning yourself to do well, and you guys are doing a good job. Okay, so I received an in-house offer 2 days ago that I really want now, but I'm now lukewarm about. I'm currently being considered a few other places, including some large cap companies. How do I buy myself more time to respond to the offer? I don't want to engage in salary negotiations until just then, so I don't waste my time until I've been taking the offer. Okay, I would say if you're only lukewarm about an offer and then you have some other offers that could come through, I don't think that you should take something that you're lukewarm about. I think whatever you do, you need to go all in it, in whatever it is. Because if your heart's not in it, then you're not going to do well. The problem with going into anything, not too well. The problem with going into any job when you're not all in is you're just not going to do the best work. You're not going to look for the most opportunities. You're just being like a mercenary. And wherever you go, you need to look at yourself like you could be there your whole career, because Otherwise, you're just going to make yourself restless. And I don't know. And if a large cap company is your goal, that's great. Then you should, stick out for that and wait until you get the kind of job you want. I think you need to go someplace where you feel like your heart's in it and that you want to do well. The idea of taking a job and settling is a real problem. When people settle, they never like what they get. They're never happy with what they get. If you settle, if you settle for a mate that you don't like settling, you won't be happy. If you settle for a job, not happy. People a lot of times will make decisions out of weakness. So if you make decisions from a place of weakness, then we'll not do well because you're going to resent the employer later on, resent the person that gave you the opportunity. So I would basically do yourself a favor and the employer the favor that if you don't want the job, just turn it down. I don't think there's any sense in putting yourself in a job or position where you're not going to be happy. It doesn't make any sense. If you're being considered at some large cap companies, then the odds are pretty good that you'll be able to get a position with a large cap company later. So there's nothing really to worry about, and you should just turn down those offers. I think that actually sends a message to yourself that you have self-respect and know what you're capable of. And by the way, an employer should not be offering someone a job that doesn't want it. So think about that. That's probably bad judgment on their part. I had a really interesting experience once where I was interviewing. This is right before I left the practice of law. And I was able to go into all these firms, big firms, and convince them to hire me. But I really didn't want to do it. And then I interviewed with a very famous attorney in New York. I think his name was Barry Ostrager. And he was at Simpson Thatcher. And I was interviewing with him. And he said, "You're just exactly what we're looking for, but I can tell that this isn't something you really want, and I need to think about this. And I'd like you to stay the afternoon and talk to some more people so I can ask them their impression." That was very smart because he could tell that he's a judge now, I think. He's a very smart guy. And people should only hire you if you want something. And that would have been a mistake. I mean, he was doing the right thing. Okay, let's see here. And if you ask a follow-up question, that's fine too. So it was a good question. I'm a second-year associate at a small plaintiff side firm. I am moving to Atlanta and would like to try to get a job at one of the bigger firms. I have found a couple that I'm interested in. The problem is I do not know if I should specify practice group, be more broad and hope something sticks. I'm cold emailing, by the way. Okay. For example, one of the firms I have is a very big interest is two groups, banking and construction litigation. I have arguably experienced in both, and not some more construction. Okay, so this is actually a very important point. I don't know if you're planning on doing plaintiff or defense work, but the best thing to do when you're with your resume typically is you always want to have different versions of your resume. So the different versions of your resume mean you'll have one that emphasizes construction and one that emphasizes bank. These two groups, by the way, banking litigation and construction litigation. Typically, the way you would do that is you would have 2 or 3 lines describing your experience, 3 lines describing experience, and then you would lead with the first lines of the resume would discuss if you wanted to reply to a construction job, would discuss construction, and then you might have another line and did other types of litigation as well, something along those lines. And then if you wanted to do banking, you would lead with your banking experience. So this is something a lot of people don't do, and you should, because when people are hiring you, they're looking for a scent, and that scent means if I have a construction job, I want to see construction. I want to see construction come first. I don't want to see banking and then construction. I want construction job. I want to see construction at the top because they want to believe that you think of yourselves as that. I have a problem because I review resumes again all day, every day, not all day, but throughout the day. And a lot of times people will say, I'm a healthcare attorney and a litigator. And when they say healthcare, a lot of times they'll mean transactional. So I'll have to go there and I'll study this resume, and then I'll go to the website of the person, and the law firm will describe them as a healthcare attorney, but then all their experience is litigation. So I don't know why they're calling them a healthcare attorney, but I'll be like, okay, this person is litigation. If you're a BCG candidate and you get an email from us, we'll typically always ask you to go in and choose one primary practice area because you can't market yourself effectively if you're doing more than one thing, because law firms want to hire specialists. They all do. Now, smaller law firms do like generalists. If you're a corporate attorney and you're working in a smaller market, they're going to want you to do a variety of things, but for the most part, they want specialists. So you just need to be able to market yourself and portray yourself as a specialist in something. And then with the resumes, you can do it that way. Cold emails are okay. I actually like sending letters that are written letters. If you do that, that's more effective. And then in any way you can get in front of people. Many times if you meet people, you should go to, if you want to do construction litigation, when you get to Atlanta, you should go to and join different forums and things and try to get involved that way. So that can be helpful. But you definitely want to have a resume that emphasizes what you do. And then if the firm has two groups, banking and construction litigation, probably want to see where you would be the best fit in there. And the cold emailing is good, but any other way you can make contact with people is really important. And because you need to make a personal connection with people. Like people, everybody wants personal connections. So like and that's really the main thing. Like everyone, like in our business, like it's people, the law firms want personal connection with our recruiters. The the candidates want personal connection, and everybody wants personal connection. And most people are just so disconnected. It's great that we can do this, Zoom conference, but at the same time, people want personal connection. So how do you connect with people personally? And so that's really one of the best ways to get a job is if you can make any type of personal connection. It goes so far towards getting things done and helping you get to the front of the line. Many times the people that are hired for jobs and get things have personal connections. If you look at a lot of these, typically with a lot of companies and a lot of even very prestigious schools, people get into them and so forth by their talents, but also many times by having some sort of personal connection. So that can make a big deal. Okay, current lateral candidate just finished callbacks with a firm. The day after the callbacks, the firm reposted the listing for the job I would be considered for. Is this a bad sign? Or perhaps a recruiting formality previously scheduled posting? I don't know if this is reading tea leaves. I'm so curious about your thoughts. No, that doesn't mean that sometimes the post will, I don't know if they posted it on their website or wherever they posted it, but sometimes some firms are just constantly recruiting for certain types of things. So there's firms that are always recruiting for corporate and litigation. And so and then they just rotate the postings. Typically when a posting goes on a job board, it'll go for a certain length of time and then need to be refreshed automatically. So when it's fresh, it'll go to the top of the results, and then it's not, it'll go to the bottom. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but I would continue applying to places. Sometimes they say, we're not sure this is the right fit. Maybe we should look at some more applicants, something along those lines. That's nothing you need to be too concerned about, but it may be a bad sign. But the point is, you need to go someplace where they like you and you like them. You shouldn't worry if you don't get the job. I don't think you should worry about it. And one of the things I wanted to share with you that's a fun fact, this is just dealing with people in general. And this is something that I've noticed that I think is true. 1/3 of the people that meet you will like you. 1/3 won't care. And then 1/3 will dislike you. Nothing you can do about it or have negative thoughts about you. If you're listening to me right now, after my presentation about going in-house, which you may want to do, you may dislike, which is fine. But 1/3 of the people out there will dislike you. And there's nothing you can do. Think about politics and stuff. If you meet people, hopefully the balance is, these people will like you or not care regardless of what you. So you're obviously trying to move the needle more towards your path. If you find a group of people that likes you, a group that likes you that you click with, make the same personality, it may be 2/3 care. 1/3, 1/6 doesn't care. Or 1/6, that sort of thing. 1/6 care, 1/6 dislike. There's nothing you can do. It's going to be like that anywhere you go. And people take all this stuff too seriously. There's nothing, a lot of it is just finding your tribe and the right people. And then if you find a group that doesn't like, then it may be the opposite. So it may be 1/6 and so forth. So just think about those factors and don't worry about it if you don't get a job. There's always going to be a place that likes you. You just have to worry. You just have to find the right group of people for you. Oh, this is good. That's good. So if a law firm asks you for a writing sample, it depends on who's asking for it. So sometimes the recruiting personnel, meaning the recruiting coordinator, may just have to put that in your file. Sometimes they won't even read. So that's a good sign. But the writing samples are important. One of the things I would say that I would highly recommend everyone on this call do is I use all sorts of, I have Grammarly, Pro Writing Aid, all these different things and this is just not true. There's a lot of problems with this document, I'm sure. But using these writing things to proofread your work is always very important. And to make sure, oh, they're having connection issues. That's not good. I don't have my internet. Anyway, but using all these kind of tools, maybe Grammarly to get a better one. Anyway, connection. Anyway, but I use this stuff all the time when I'm trying to, let me just make sure I'm trying to do this. It doesn't matter, but you definitely want to use whatever you can in terms of, look, it's loaded another screen, to proofread your work, because when you proofread your work, it makes a major difference in terms of, let me just try to log at this. I just wanted to show you. It makes a major difference in terms of your ability to check your writing sample. So what they're typically looking for is that you're not making any dumb mistakes and all that sort of thing. So writing samples are a good sign, but just make sure you carefully work. I think the same thing with all of your emails that go out and your all written communication. It should always be perfect in terms of the punctuation. This is what attorneys are paid for. So if they see like a lot of dumb issues with your writing sample, then that's a problem. And I just remember from practicing, that the tighter your language, the more direct your points and so forth, then the better off you'll be. So you need to be very careful with what you're doing in terms of your writing samples. So just make sure if they're asking for that, I don't know the ethics of this, but having someone else look over to make sure it looks good is always a very important thing. Okay. So just do the best you can. And law firms typically will have people inside of them that do nothing but review writing samples and love doing it and criticizing and tearing them up. So sometimes it'll just be for your file, or a percentage of the time they may not even review it. But if they do review it, then you need to make sure that it's okay. I currently do labor and employment in one of the many boutiques. Besides my work consisting mostly of, I just don't understand this. Oh, here we go. And now it started. So you can see here, just if you look at this paragraph here and you can say it's an unknown word, okay, that's fine. But you can see how they would go and clean up a lot of this stuff. And it's interesting when you start using these grammar checking software. And there's a bunch of them that I use, but it really can help you. Okay, let's see. I currently do labor and employment in one of the many boutiques, but besides my work consisting mostly of EP, LI, heavy caseload, and far below market pay, what are the other differences what I might be doing as a big law labor and associate? From what I understand, a smaller caseload, an SEPLI, sometimes your transactional work and work less action work. It almost sounds like big law L&E is easier than the boutiques because the caseload is less, but it's a big law, so I assume the work is more intense. Okay, this is a good question. So the problem with labor employment is typically ongoing work for most companies. So what that means is most companies have ongoing counseling and litigation work. So just imagine that you own a McDonald's. Think about how many times McDonald's is sued, how many times it have labor and employment issues, or you own a department store. So the idea of that is that like the companies want to save money and have the work done by law firms that do not charge a lot. And that's just how it works. So there's a lot of very good firms out there. You have places like, there's a ton of very good firms. Some of the best, I think the best labor and employment firms for companies are places like, and this is actually helpful for everybody, and I'm just calling out these firms I like. Places like Jackson Lewis, or Mendelsohn, or I don't know, Ford Harrison, there's a ton of places like this. And so these firms typically, the reason they're very good labor employment firms is they will not charge these kind of outrageous, and they'll counsel companies on an ongoing basis. And so they don't pay their attorneys as much, but they're very good places and they're considered big law firms. But a lot of the work is just ongoing and they can work on smaller cases. Now, the problem with the larger firms is larger firms are getting out of labor and employment. Like an example would be Quinn Emanuel. So Quinn Emanuel actually started out as doing a lot of labor and employment work. The reason is they would basically go to companies and say, I want to do your labor and employment work. And they would give them these cases, and the cases weren't that they could bill out at lower rates. And then after they did a good job, they would ask for the commercial litigation work. Labor and employment ongoing work is typically not high billable rates because it's just going on all the time. If you're defending a McDonald's against someone suing it because someone, I don't know, there's some employee dispute with a minimum wage worker, and there's not a lot of money involved in that. So they can't afford to have high billable rates. And so large law firms, and then Quinn Emanuel is an example. They actually went out of labor and employment and stopped doing the work because they weren't making enough money and they couldn't charge high rates, and they wanted to have to pay their attorneys a lot more money and so forth. So large law firms are getting away from labor and employment. Only thing that they're really interested in away from this Only thing that they're really interested in is they are interested in class actions, and they're interested in larger cases, class actions, big disputes with a lot of money at stake. So companies will hire big firms for that, but they're not going to hire them all the time for smaller work. So that's just something to think about. They'll do work for their clients, but the clients, it doesn't make sense for them to use these large firms for their ongoing work. And they want to use a boutique and that sort of thing. And the pay is always going to be below market in labor and employment. But labor employment's a great practice group to be in because there's always going to be the work, and you can work as an assistant, and you'll have a lot more employment stability. The larger firms, it's very difficult to keep your job because they have to pay you a lot from the clients, these class actions that go on for a long time. In many cases, I think labor and employment, by the way, is a great practice area for people that want to be litigators and that sort of thing. I think it's great working at these kinds of firms. I think the people coming out of these firms seem compared to a lot of the large law firms, you're not going to make as much, but you'll do well. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think working in boutiques is good. I think you can always switch sides and do plaintiff's work as a labor and employment attorney. I think that there's a lot of really good benefits of being a labor and employment attorney and just something I would think about. But yeah, larger law firms typically steer away from doing most transactional labor and employment work because it's just not worth the client's money. They'll do it, but it's not worth the client's money. Is it common to be ghosted after being contacted by a firm to schedule a screen? No, this just means that keep in mind that the person that's contacting the screener is probably, and it's also, if it's fall recruiting season, it's also the person is just busy. It's not personal. So it's someone that's just probably in an administrative role doing it. And they may be overwhelmed. They maybe have other things going on. So I would just say, do not worry about it. It's not personal to you. It's just the way the firm's disorganized, and it's just organization at the firm. And it's nothing really to be concerned about. Do not worry about it. And if they may be ghosting you, and if they're ghosting you, then great. 1/3 of the people you meet will like you, 1/3 won't care, 1/3 will dislike you. If not, just move on. You can follow up, but you certainly don't want to be too pushy. These are people that are in administrative roles and have people barking at them. One of the things that I've learned and the mistakes that I made in my career are you need to be as nice as you possibly can to everyone you can. So the person that's doing the availability and the recruiting coordinator's assistant, or I don't know what kind of firm it is, but you need to be extra nice to them because they actually have a lot of control. Many times partners and other people give them a tremendous amount of autonomy and will listen to their advice about who to hire and bring in, and will defer to it because a partner, or the people that are doing the hiring, are often very busy. They're very busy and they don't really have time necessarily to make decisions. They'll ask them, who did you like the best? And they'll tell them. And they'll tell the person that's the nicest to them. There are firms where I once was sitting in the lobby of a law, and this was, I don't remember what this was for, but I was sitting in the lobby of a law firm and someone, anyway, there was a secretary that was in the lobby that took the people that came in. And a few minutes while I was sitting there, someone came up after they took another kid that was sitting there for an interview or stuff. And a partner came up with another partner and asked, what did you think of him? Was he nice? Was he on time? All these kind of questions. And I thought that was very interesting. So they actually interviewed the girl behind the front desk, who was probably no more than 22 years old, about how the person interacted with them. So you need to be nice to anybody, especially the administrative people, because they have so much power, more than you can realize. I've seen secretaries inside of law firms destroy partners' careers just by, a lot of times the people that you think have the least power actually have the most power. So don't worry if the screener's not contacting. Just be very nice and just chill out and don't worry about it. Okay. I'm a 3.5, started a big law commercial, went in-house for 2 years now. Transactional sales counsel. That's cool. Attorneys are great in sales, by the way. That's always a good job. I've been recently wanting to get off the sales transaction, put more of a corporate generalist role with my company or another company. Can I make this pivot without needing to do M&A, et cetera, and then go back in-house again? Let me just see here. Commercial took and went in-house. Okay. Now, I don't know about M&A, but I do think you could get into general corporate transactional work. So I would just start asking for assignments. And then as you get more assignments and get comfortable with the work, start taking more and more of them. And then maybe suggesting to other people that you could use extra help or stuff. So I would just M&A is a little bit more complex. You may be able to get involved in aspects of it. I don't know how big your company is. It sounds like a pretty good sized company. I think that you definitely could make that transition. You could always get back in. Yeah, but you can definitely make a pivot to a corporate generalist. Corporate generalist, by the way, if anybody has a question, will do all different types of corporate work. So they won't be like a specialist in M&A. They'll help with filing corporate documents and registrations and minutes of meetings and making sure things are being done properly and all the corporate formalities are being. But yes, you can definitely transition into that. And that's probably a good idea. A corporate generalist may have a better runway in terms of working in a law firm in the long run than you would have necessarily working in a company in the long run than in a tech transactions attorney. Because tech transactions there's not as much need for it as there is for corporate attorneys. All companies need corporate attorneys for the most part once they get to be decent size. Okay, I'm working in Vol 10 New York City firm that's great for all lit areas. I read on TLS that exit opportunities are less plentiful for this department, and that it's also a dying big law area. Okay. If my goals are to be useful as a long-term associate, both of the firm, potentially mid-sized firm in a secondary market later on, which areas of litigation should I try to get the most work? Are the lit areas I should focus on different if I want to work in-house instead of later? Are there specific litigation areas that are growing and likely to be of interest in the future? Wow, that's a good question. So the litigation, if you're in a big New York City law firm, I don't know what practice area you're in. But you have commercial litigation, which is typically companies fighting over contracts, fighting over bad contracts. Then you have all sorts of different types of sub-levels of litigations. You have insurance, you have IP, I don't know what practice area you're in exactly. As a general rule, the more specialized litigation you're in, the more opportunities. But there's always opportunities for commercial litigators. So commercial litigators are just companies fighting over different things. So that's always a good practice area. And the dying big law areas are typically going to be a bunch of different things. I'm trying to see if there's a way I can pull up the BCG practice areas for you. But if you go on the BCG website, you can basically see all the different types of litigation. Let me just see if there's a way I can do that. 1 second. Okay, so litigation, yeah, we can do this here. So you have, let's call litigation. You have, so you have appellate litigation. That's a difficult one to be involved in. Appellate litigation, you typically are not going to have a lot of opportunities. Typically clerks, construction is a good one. You can always, that's one of the best ones, by the way. There's a huge demand for that. E-discovery and entertainment are not as good. ERISA is a good one. General commercial is probably the best, but because there's a lot of opportunities. Healthcare is excellent for lateral opportunities. Insurance is good. International arbitration is almost impossible because there's just not a lot of jobs and there's a lot of people trying to do it. Labor and employment is good. Medical malpractice is excellent. Anybody that's a medical malpractice attorney, if they're very marketable. I was reading an article the other day, they're the highest paid, even though it's very interesting. Product liability is another good one. Real estate's a good one. Securities litigation, tax is a difficult one, but there's also the tax resolution. White collar crime is very difficult because there's not a lot of opportunity. Workers' compensation is good. So those are some of the practice areas. But in terms of litigation, if you want to go in-house, employment's always good. It would depend on, I don't know what practice area you're trying to do, but the way to get a sense of that would be anything that our company does on an ongoing basis would be good. Real estate litigation is good because you can always go in-house as a real estate attorney in a real estate company. Labor and employment is always good because you can always get positions in labor and employment working for companies. Anything that companies need a lot of is good. Anything that's exotic, which would be antitrust and other stuff, it can be harder. Insurance is good because you can work for insurance companies. So just think about what kind of companies need what I do. I hope that's a good question for you. But I would say if you're at the best thing I would do is try to get commercial litigation experience. Okay, funds attorneys. Okay, so I don't know, but with their funds question, what I would say is why would anyone stay on the law firm side? Typically, it's because of the quality of work you're getting and the variety of work. So if you're working for just one fund, the problem with being a funds attorney inside of a company is that funds go out of business. There can be all sorts of problems. And then being able to stay as long as you can at a firm is also a good thing. but you have to look at what appeals to you the most. I have talked to a lot of funds attorneys that have gone in-house and they do seem happy. So I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with that. I think that I don't know what the hours are where you are, but that's another thing. You have to look at what the issue is. One of the things I can say about funds associates as opposed to M&A and other corporate practice groups is there's actually a lot more demand for funds associates because there's not as many of them. So that's why, and so law firms have a harder time attracting them. And because they have a harder time attracting them, they tend to hold on to them longer. I don't know in terms of the number of funds lawyers that want to be partner, but I think that if you become very good at being a funds attorney, I do think with that kind of specialty, if you're able to network with funds, other funds with funds and so forth, then you definitely have a much easier time of being partner and bringing in business. I think it's a good practice area to be in. The other thing to remember too is when you're going in-house, and this is a very important point, when going in-house, your odds of being a general counsel and big time attorney are always better if you're a partner at your firm first, partner at your firm. If you're a huge $3 billion or more fund and they're going to want to hire someone that's been a partner, they're not going to say, oh, we got this 6-year associate as a partner here. They're going to actually much prefer as our general counsel, they're going to much prefer having partners. If you ever can, before deciding to go in-house, you always want to do everything you can to be a partner first, even if it's just a service partner, because that provides the company more credibility. It also provides you a lot of credibility when you're dealing with outside attorneys. I always try to make partner first. If you make partner before going in-house, or if you make partner, you're going to have more opportunities. You will go farther. Because if you just think about it, if it's that hard to make partner in most firms, then it's going to be much better for you in the long. Okay. Would you take a role of a startup company in an industry that is likely to consolidate? And that's a good point. I'm a mid-senior big law corporate associate. I had the opportunity to join a startup that is entering its Series C. The space is consolidating. It's past due for consolidation. And the consensus from those in the space is that the company will be one to be acquired, not the one that will acquire others. Comp is below my big law comp, but they offer me more than I expected. The comp is very doable. Benefits are okay, but no bonus. Stock options, 401k match, pay, health costs. Big pluses, I would be the sole in-house legal counsel that would want me to grow into the GC. Downside is I would have to commute to work. Currently work, don't own a car. Would have to leave my year-end bonus and half of the COVID bonus. My year bonus. Wow. Yeah, it sounds like a good opportunity in a lot of respects. And everything that I've talked about today about going in-house and the negatives certainly applies. But if the industry is going to consolidate, and if the company's doing well and it's acquired, then the stock price, then the stock options are likely to go up in value quite a bit. And it could be a good opportunity for you if you have a lot of faith in it. I'm not an expert in negotiating stock options, but I might try to get more rather than less compensation and so forth with the idea that you want to build a department. Here you say you don't own a car and that's fine, but commuting to work is fine. I don't know that I would give up $150,000, but that might be quite a bit. So I don't know. I'd have to think about that if I were you. You never want to, the big thing I tell people is that your happiness and success is more important than short-term inconvenience. And so that's a big deal. And then you need to ask yourself, so the commute and stuff is your happiness and success. Sorry. You have to ask yourself if this is really something that these money, $150,000 will not look like anything to you in the future. Really, it's a lot of money, but if this works out, it won't, and the commute won't be anything. So these are just two small things that could be standing between you and a really good opportunity. The other thing I don't like is when people say stuff like, we'll see, or we'll talk about this in the future. That means they're unwilling to commit. And if someone's unwilling to commit to making you GC, then that's a problem. So that means it may never happen. And then you can't trust people if they don't put anything in writing. And I would think about that. What does that mean? So just anybody that's negotiating offers, by the way, always ask yourself, if someone's not willing to put something down or they're saying we'll see in the future, that typically means that you're going to not get what you want in the future. It's just something to think about that I would be careful about in the future. Okay, let's see here. What practice area, if any, leads to the highest paying in-house positions? I would say anything. It depends. There are litigators that do well, but in general, corporate is corporate generalists. or specialists are the ones that tend to do the best. That's just been my experience. But I think in terms of the highest pay, the reasons that most companies need when they're hiring in-house people, they tend to hire corporate people because they have the most versatile skills. So that would be typically that. Same question, which one has the most in-house corporate opportunities? Same thing, corporate. So you have to realize that the reason for, as I said earlier in the presentation, the reason for the salary increases is always the reason for salary wars. For reason for salary war in the legal profession has always been, wars in the legal profession has always been corporate companies poaching corporate attorneys. So that's just how that works. So the webinars are accessible. There's a question here after the end of the session, and they're all on the BCG site. So you can find them there. There's a section if you just go to the pull down menu. These are put up a few days later, but yeah, and then all the past ones should be on there as well. Okay. So tax resolution, this question is promoted as a niche area for CPAs and enrolled agents. You mentioned this. Would this area from a legal perspective, anything other than criminal representations? No, so tax resolution doesn't have to be criminal. Most of the time it's not. Tax resolution just basically means if you owe $100,000 in taxes and you can't pay it, then the IRS will accept payments and you can work things out and you can negotiate it. CPAs can do it, attorneys can do it. It's not a great area in terms of, it can be a good area. I just remember when I was practicing law, there was a course on it that I took just because it looked like an interesting area of the law where you could get business fairly easily because you can basically buy lists of people that owe taxes, and then you can send letters and they can hire you, and you can be a good niche area. Honestly, there's so many good tax resolutions. One, trust in estates is a great one. Immigration. There's so many different practice areas you can learn. If you would like dealing with people that aren't paying their taxes or have tax problems and dealing with the IRS, that obviously has its pluses and minuses, but there's a lot of very big people that use tax. Probably Donald Trump probably uses tax resolution type attorneys. So it depends on what you want to do, but it's just basically, there's nothing illegal about it. You're just, for the most part, just working out payment plans, or people are bankrupt and I don't know, there's different states and stuff helping them with their tax work. So it's not that, but it's just one that you can learn. And the problem is, like anything, there's bad players in it. So there's people that advertise on the radio and they may not really be doing anything that good. And so you need to be careful, but you need to learn about all this stuff. And the thing is so cool is you can take classes and all this stuff. Like you can take classes in how to become a personal injury lawyer. You can take classes and there's classes about that. There's classes about tax resolution. There's classes about immigration, trust in estates. And so all these branches of law, there's people that have done it. Resolution, trust in estates. And there's people that have done it before, and then they'll teach classes. And in most cases, all of these practice areas, by the way, you can make much more than you would working for a law firm. Because remember, in a law firm, the law firm has to make money off of you and has to pay overhead and all this sort of stuff. So you can, if your goal is to make money, you can do very well in all these practice areas. But you just need to become a student of the practice area and market. And there's all sorts of online classes about it. Okay, I'm being considered for an in-house position with a startup. 1.5 years out, getting a position that I'm getting a position that I'm not getting in my current company, but we're not in salary negotiations yet. Okay, great. Your thoughts on going in-house with relevant ventures scared the shit out of me. Scared the whatever. Wanted to know if there are any questions I can ask hiring team to get more insight on how healthy and how long the company will be around. Is there anything I need to invest in on my own? Okay, so the problem with new companies, then I would say if I was 20 years ago going to work at this company, if I was a young attorney, would have been career suicide, because young companies do not have the management skills. The young companies do not always, unless they're well-funded, do not always have management skills. It depends on, does the founder have experience? Do they have advisors? And all sorts of stuff. One of the things that should scare the hell out of you, and this is actually a really good point. This is what should scare the hell out of you about going in-house, especially in a new company. The people that are there at the beginning, or at a company at the beginning, will be taken out when company grows, most likely. And more experienced people will be brought in. So just think about it this way. So if I have a young company that's disorganized and I'm a young founder and stuff, I'm going to bring in people like me. As the company grows, and I start wanting to talk to banks about raising public funds or whatever, I'm going to want a more experienced, different type of attorney working in my company. There's no way that I'm going to want to keep the person that was the kind of people that I had there initially in there in the long run. And management will change as the company grows, as the company takes money. New counsel will be demanded by venture capitalists and private equity and all sorts of things. So that's what should scare the hell out of you. No one in a new company can guarantee anything about what's going to happen in the future. You're almost better off. If it's well funded, that's fine, but they're probably going to, as the company gets better funded, they're going to bring in a different caliber of people as they get different. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but what that means is they're going to bring in people that have the experience and have done the things that you may be doing before and have a different type of judgment about situations. So just think about how you analyze legal problems. I don't know how long you've been practicing law, but think about the way you analyze legal problems at the beginning of your career and the way you think about things now. This is the same way that in-house counsel thinks. So you should be asking those questions and then understanding what the company's business model is and whether it works and how it works is also very important. And they're not really looking at you to understand that. They're more looking just to hire and put people in positions, but they don't know. And then look at how does the executive team treat you and how important do you seem to them? What level of control do the founders have? The founder may be just someone that's very enthusiastic, but founders get taken out too. So typically like a founder will start the company, but then as the company is taking money, it may become clear that they don't have management skills, and managing something and growing it are totally different things. So I hope that helps. Great question. Okay. Our final question is, let's see, I'm pursuing a PhD in life sciences and plan to go to law school to be a patent attorney. What future opportunities would be lower tax cost? Yeah, so the law school you go to isn't really that as important for patent attorneys. You want to go to hopefully an accredited law school. But if you have a PhD, typically there's an article I wrote called Why Law Firms Have No Idea How to Hire Patent Attorneys. So what happens with most patent attorneys is that they end up going to law school later in their career because they're doing all this stuff. They typically don't have the best grades because they're doing science related stuff, or it's harder to get good grades. And then if they go to law school because they don't necessarily go to the best law schools because they're already making money doing whatever they're doing, or they're farther along in their careers. So typically a patent attorney will be hired at a law firm that's not that great. So the first law firms are hired at typically aren't the best. And then after that, then they'll get a job in a bigger law firm later. So hire that. So schools are important for first job. Schools and grades are important for first job, but not job after that. So thank you everyone for being on this webinar today. I appreciate all the questions. I think there were just awesome questions today, and I appreciate everyone listening. I hope that this webinar helped you learn more about going in-house and kind of the dangers of it. And I look forward to talking next week. And if there are any questions, I answered all the questions today, but if there's anything that you think of after the webinar, just feel free to ask it next week and I'd be happy to answer it for you. Thanks again.